Bring in two former Republican presidential candidates, former Virginia governor and former RNC chair Jim Gilmore, who ran back in 2016. Good to see you. And former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, who ran in 2012. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Governor Gilmore, starting with you, how much do you think the shooting is going to transform the focus of the RNC and really of the election? Or will it?
Well, I think that it will. What we really saw here was such a threat that's really been created by this rhetoric that we've seen in the campaign. President Biden is president of the United States. He has a special responsibility, which I think he's not lived up to. This language of talking about President Trump as a menace, that he needs to be put into a bullseye, that he's a threat to democracy. The threat to democracy has been a principal theme of the Democrats in this race, and it's not right, because it just basically implies to people that the assassination should be invited. And it has to stop, particularly from the chief executive, the president of the United States. He can't continue to use this kind of shrill, irresponsible language.
And Governor Pawlenty, former President Trump could name his running mate as early as today, right? Do you see this attempted assassination potentially changing who the former president picks, or you think his mind's been made up and it's not changing?
I think this close to the election or the pick, that he's probably already made up his mind, is not likely to change it. But I do think the possibility of a surprise does lurk. I think the candidates that you have up on the screen and have been talked about, have been vetted and discussed. But I do think the possibility of somebody like even Governor Youngkin from Virginia, a state that could be in play if there are VPs on the ticket, could be very enticing for President Trump to take a consideration or perhaps potentially select in the VP pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a dark horse. He loves a good surprise. Governor Gilmore, Nikki Haley is now booked to speak at the RNC on Tuesday. That's after she was initially, wasn't even sure if she was scheduled to be speaking or how, the relationship that has been so tense between the two of them during the primary. What do you think you're going to hear from her?
Well, I think she's going to speak on unity. I think that the invitation to her is a unity gesture towards President Trump. Trying to bring the party together and to create a theme of unity, and he has said that. And following this assassination attempt, I think that the vice presidential nominee that we're talking about is terribly important. The President Biden did a pick based upon race and gender, not upon qualifications to be president. I think the assassination attempt has demonstrated the importance of that pick. Who it's going to be, we can't tell. I think that each of the candidates that have been talked about up to this point have pluses and minuses. It's really up to the president to choose. But I hope that President Trump will focus on the fact that this assassination attempt has demonstrated that you have to really choose somebody the American people will have confidence in, who could take over if a tragedy occurs.
Absolutely, one heartbeat away. Governor Pawlenty, Senator J.D. Vance is facing criticism this morning after he blamed the Biden campaign's rhetoric for the shooting in a way. Do you see this impacting his chances at being VP?
I do not. I think President Trump is going to pick who he wants to pick, and I don't think he's going to be deterred by any sort of criticism or public discourse about various issues. And I think, Senator Vance is coming from a state that's also a very important state, but increasingly red, but also very tight. And keep in mind, one of the primary considerations for President Trump is going to be somebody who's loyal. And J.D. Vance has demonstrated, at least in recent years, to be very loyal to President Trump.
All right, Governors Tim Pawlenty and Jim Gilmore, thank you so much for joining us. We are anxiously awaiting the Veep stakes. Hopefully we'll get an answer today. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.